I am so excited to welcome my guest onto the show today. She is someone who I massively rate professionally. Her approaches and thinking around teaching and learning and all things technology are hugely in alignment with me. Not that she and I live in an echo chamber, but it's been a real privilege to know and to have worked alongside a few times this person over the last 5-10 years or so. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce to the show today the one and only ClassTechTips, that is Monic Burns. Welcome, Monica.
Thank you so much for having me today.
And I'm so excited to have you. I mean, I was thinking back about where we've worked together, many places, Berlin, Amsterdam. And of course, I've been following your work and the things you share for a long time. And one of the things I really rate about the work that you do is it is purposeful uses of technology. It's not just using tech for tech's sake. And we see that a lot with the work you share on the blog and on your website and in the books that you've written as well. So I'm really excited to have you on the show today. But for those who don't know you, Monica, could you just take a moment to talk about who you are, where you've come from, how you got to be where you are with the work you do today?
Absolutely. And thank you so much, Mark, for the invitation to come on and chat with you today. I know we've been able to connect as fellow Apple Distinguished Educators and special events, especially some of the ones, I'm based here on the East Coast in the States, but some of the events I've been able to do overseas just been so much fun. And so I am a former New York City public school teacher. So I taught in a classroom with an overhead projector and chalk and a chalkboard and all of those fun things before we transitioned into a magnet school and we're able to go one-to-one with technology. So going one-to-one with iPads about 10 years ago now, as we're talking, kind of within that past decade. And that's where my work really began, thinking about technology integration, building upon the traditional best practices and looking at ways we could really make the most with these digital tools that we had at our fingertips at that time. And so I've been out of the classroom for several years now, running professional development. So virtually hosting webinars for organizations and schools and districts, and then on-site professional development, as well as writing. So on my blog, ClassTechTips.com, and my books with ASCD, and my podcast, the Easy EdTech podcast, which just reached 100 episodes a couple weeks ago.
Wow, I can't believe it's been so long. My goodness, wow. Time just flies by so quickly, doesn't it? Thanks for that little summary of your sort of history and what sort of led you to where you are now. You're quite, you've got a few followers on social media. And so I thought, I found a photo of the two of us from, I think it was from the work we did in Amsterdam. I shared a photo of us this morning and said, I'm really excited to have Monica on for a chat tonight. Does anybody have any questions or sort of top tips that you'd like Monica to share? And we've had quite a few responses. So I'm really excited to bring these through. We've had responses from people from the UK, from the Middle East, from all over. So I'm really excited to ask these for you. And just to be clear, Monica has had sight of these before I showed you. So she's not coming in completely blind, but you haven't had much time to prepare, to be fair. So I'm really excited to hear your responses. The first question for you, Monica, relates to EAL and SEND learners. Now, for those who are in the US and don't know what those terms stand for, EAL is students where English is an additional language. It's not their first language. And SEND refers to those children who have additional learning needs. It could be that they're dyslexic or they're dyspraxic or any number of different potential things there. But this is from Cauchi. And so I'm keen to hear your insights and tips on how we can use technology to support these types of learners, please, Monica.
Yes, so when looking at these groups of learners, and of course there's benefits for many different students when it comes to the tip I'll share here, but especially with these groups, I'm always looking for resources that give kids an opportunity to record their voice, record video, and talk about their learning. So I taught in a classroom where, I worked with students who in many ways were conversationally proficient in English, which was my primary language of instruction. But when it came to writing about something that they were going to do, right, that became a bit of a barrier, right? They could tell me all the things about the differences between different triangles, but when it came to writing the paragraph to explain, why an isosceles and a scalene triangle were different, became a really big barrier for them to share their learning or show what they know. So I love screencasting tools where kids can draw and sketch and record their voice at the same time. I like tools where kids can jump on video and pause if they need a moment to think, and then hit record again and keep their thinking going. So some of my favorite tools within this category are Flipgrid. So Flipgrid, of course, has lots of extra accessibility features like Immersive Reader and like, other components. But I love that as a tool because it gives kids the option to draw, to get on camera, to hold up the construction paper that's on their desk next to them, to cover their face if they don't feel comfortable being on video. And it's a great way to get kids an opportunity to build confidence, to talk about what it is that they've learned. And it doesn't have to be a substitute for writing that paragraph, right? But it can help them on the pathway to getting there by making sure that their energy and enthusiasm feels good, that they understand that how they share can look different in different contexts, and just building that confidence and capacity for the next pieces. So that's one of my favorite resources to share because it has so many components built in. And I've also, just last week, was working with a group of educators in Kentucky, and we were talking about some different resources within Flipgrid specifically, and looking at the Discovery Library and some of the resources that are pre-made and ready to go, but also give you the option to customize. So that's one that's been front of mind, especially for this population of students.
Yeah, and it's the same as with educators, isn't it? Having the capacity and developing their confidence in using these things as well. It really gives them a chance to sort of show what they know. I find the same sort of thing myself, particularly sort of getting boys, in terms of their writing. Ask them to describe, a recent football match or a goal that was scored. Their oracy would be absolutely fantastic. Getting to write it down, so much more difficult. So some fantastic ideas there, and like you, I'm a big fan of Flipgrid too. There are so many options in there, aren't there, to help learners in so many ways, shapes and forms. Thank you so much for that, Monica. I've got another question now. This one comes from Linda Parsons, who works at Dara International School in Dubai. She says, have you got any top tips edu on slick starter activities that teachers can give to students that take the cognitive load off the teachers at the start of the lesson and promote collaboration or online oracy? Have you got any thoughts on that at all?
So one of my favorite starter activities, or a do now activity, getting kids either working independently and then sharing at the end, or working collaboratively, is using tools that allow students to have an open space, create things, move things around, organize ideas. And I've been a really big fan of Jamboard this year, especially because of the way it gives kids an opportunity to jump right in and have some control of a space. So although I'm out of the classroom this year, I have worked with a few different students in kind of smaller engagements, and that's been something that's really helped bridge the physical gap and getting them into a space that I have either set up for them, like a template, and then ask them to jump in on their own. So what I like about that tool is you can do a forced copy, just like you can in other Google tools. So if you make a great template, like a sorting activity, you can give a forced copy to everyone and kids can do it and then share or talk about it. Or you might have a small group, like 5 students, inside of one shared Jamboard. They can move things around, and it's a great way to just get kids started, settled, orient them within a digital space so that they've got their tabs up and going. And so that's one that's definitely been a favorite to use. I also like, pairing something like that with an activity like a this or that activity or a prompt. Khan Academy, we usually think of as being tutorials, right, or online videos, but they also have something called Khan Academy Refresh. And that has a bunch of brain break style activities that you could definitely bring in for a starter activity with a group. I like those ones, and I like Jamboard, right? Because they're both flexible enough that it's not telling you the only way to do something, or this is just for students in grade 8 or in grade 2, right? You can really make some decisions that are going to be just right for your group.
That's a brilliant response. I'm a huge fan of Jamboard as well. It's really sort of hit the scene, as it were, by storm, hasn't it? It's been fantastic, and so many schools have made great use of it during the last sort of 12 months in particular. I'm just thinking, Monica, though, what about schools that are sort of Microsoft 365 based, with Jamboard being a Google tool? Can you suggest anything that might be appropriate for a Microsoft school?
Absolutely. So one resource that's come up a lot. So I know you and I, before hitting record, Clubhouse came up right in the conversation. And so Clubhouse has been a really fun space to connect with educators. And I run a Monday room and a Thursday room. And the Thursday room is all around, top, your tip from the week, kind of, right? Kind of alongside your top tips here, right? So people come on and share something that's been exciting for them that week. And one of the resources that I've heard a lot of, I did a blog post in partnership with them last year, is Whiteboard Chat. And that's one that I think people are really gravitating to for some of the same reasons that Jamboard is appealing. It gives the flexibility, the collaboration, and that should be, I haven't used it in an Office 365 environment specifically, but that should be friendly for that environment.
Brilliant. Thank you for offering that alternative there, Monica. That's really good. Thank you so much. Next question comes from Sabe, who's also in the Middle East as well. And this is something that's really difficult to sort of get right, isn't it? I think the statistics say something like 70% of most change management processes fail. So if you're looking to do this sort of thing in your school, it's really important to sort of get those conditions right. So his question is, what are your top tips, Edu, for getting staff buy-in to upskill and innovate / change the way things have traditionally been done in the classroom? What are your thoughts on that, Monica?
So I do a lot of work with classroom teachers and instructional coaches, whether virtually now or visiting different schools. And so this is something that is front of mind for me in my conversations, right, with educators. Everyone is always very friendly and pleasant in my interactions with them. But if I know that they might have a barrier, or they may not quite see, why something is important or worth their time, I think it's really important to step back and make sure that you are identifying a pain point and making things very relevant to the situation. And this is a coaching strategy all the time, right? But with technology, especially, if you can show that first step, right? Just get that foot in the door with someone and show them how this particular tool or resource or strategy, whatever it is, right, is going to save them time, is going to help with their workflow, is going to do something that they've always wanted to do in a better way, or finally making something possible, or rooting something in a very specific experience that they have with their students. And, this goes along with a conversation I often have that is not part of this question, but sometimes the adjacent part, which is getting buy-in from veteran teachers for technology, right? And so I hear from people, typically outside of our sphere, right, Mark? But I hear from people, oh, isn't it, don't all the older teachers hate all this technology, and aren't they, and you hear this from people, and I'm like, you have not sat down with a veteran teacher, because, they are the ones that have the experience and the context. So when you introduce a virtual reality tool, that allows them, or get into Google Arts and Culture and look at coral reefs together, or whatever it might be, they're the ones that have taught ecosystems for 10, 15, 30 years, and realize that this tool is going to help their students understand an ecosystem or a biome or wherever in a new way. It's often the new teachers who don't have the context, who see something that is really exciting and then can start thinking through, but they don't have that foundation to build off of. So when it comes to getting buy-in for any kind of change, I think really rooting it in what is that foundation we're building off of? What are the assets in this situation? What has this person shown that they're really interested in, and we can dial it up with that technology component? Or am I being a good enough listener to understand what their pain points are, so I can offer whatever the thing is in a context that's a solution to a problem?
I think that's absolutely key what you said there about sort of really listening to them and taking on board their points of view. Something I try and do with those sorts of educators when I'm working with them is thinking, what's in it for them?
Exactly.
And so when you can work out where the wins will be, where the benefits will be, that's a great way of sort of bringing them on board with you with that journey. Thank you so much for your insights there, Monica. And I knew you'd be great. This is going fantastic. Thank you so much. My next question for you is from an early years teacher working with very young students. But he's asked if you've got any ideas about how to go about creating digital portfolios for particularly quite young learners. Have you got any thoughts on that at all?
So digital portfolios are wonderful, and there's just so much that you can do with different groups of students when it comes to having them collect their work, handpick their work, reflect on what it is that they've made, right? So many different things. And especially now where you might have students of all ages, including the 4 to 8-year-old students, creating things in lots of different digital spaces, having a system or a vision for what organization is going to look like is really important. So I really love tools like Seesaw for that age level. If you are working with students, and even if you're using other tools, Seesaw might be the tool that you go to for digital portfolios, because kids can snap picture of the, the model they made out of glitter and glue and construction paper, and then upload it to Seesaw, record their voice talking about it, and have that as an entry onto their portfolio. You can have them do a digital product. Maybe they made something in Book Creator, and then they have the link and they upload it to Seesaw. I say upload, but really just copy and pasting the link, right, and plugging it in, and maybe even recording their voice. And what it does with that particular group of students, that age group, is it gives you a lot of flexibility within a portfolio. So you might decide that it's very open, so students can see each other's work and leave voice recordings or voice comments. You might turn off that feature and say, we're just going to push this out and have it with your work going down the line one way. You can have the calendar organization feature so that you can tap on different dates and see the progress over the year. Or you might just carve out one day a month or one day a week for kids to give a quick update, and depending on the structure of your digital portfolio. And one thing that's nice about Seesaw, right, depending on which kind of level of it that you have, all the things I just talked about, right, you could do completely for free. You might set up a class blog so you can publish right from Seesaw for a larger, wider audience, or any of the individual things kids add to their Seesaw space. So for example, you might have students take a picture of an illustration that they made and record their voice telling the story of their picture. Well, in that case, you can share that recording with their picture as a direct link or QR code. And of course, there's a family component with Seesaw. So that's one of my favorite places for having kids gather their work. But if you are going to take a little bit more kind of ownership in terms of organization, like maybe kids are doing something and you're taking a little bit more of the heavy lifting of organizing it, you could even have them in a spot like Microsoft PowerPoint and have a slide for everything that they've done each month. And then perhaps have them add a voice button or voice recording, or add a video to a slide. So there's a few different directions to go in, but I think Seesaw would give a lot of student agency. And you could do something similar in Flipgrid, depending on how you set up groups and topics.
That's great. And I love that PowerPoint example there as well, because I mean, I know they've recently added voice functionality into Google Slides as well, so that would work on the same front as well. You can drop audio files into Keynote as well. So the ideas are really easily transferable across whichever ecosystem you choose to work with. Again, another great response. Thank you so much, Monica. My next question comes from John Neale. This is where that Clubhouse sort of thing came from before. He said, do you have any tips edu thoughts on where you might see apps like Clubhouse and or TikTok as vehicles for delivering and enhancing learning experiences in the future? What are your thoughts?
So with these two specific apps, I want to be careful to make sure I'm clear that these are apps for 18 and over, right? So not apps that we would necessarily invite students into, but we can use them as inspiration, right? So
yeah, absolutely. I see them as places for professional learning, for adults coming together and having those conversations.
That being said, I think you can really look at them in both ways, right? So from a professional development standpoint, Clubhouse has really been wild to be a part of for the past 2 or 3 months now. I don't really put a lot of, I wouldn't say I put a lot of energy myself into follower counts, but I will give these numbers because I think it illustrates how fast things have grown, right? So I started using Clubhouse about 2 months ago. I have over 2,000 followers on this platform. And it's something where the growth has been exponential because the platform's growing exponentially. I started a club last week. It's been maybe 7 or 8 days. It started with 0, right? And now there's almost 600 members and followers. So again, I don't think the numbers matter in the long run, but right now they illustrate just how quick the growth, right, is happening. And so Clubhouse has been wonderful. It reminds me so much, Mark, of a Twitter chat. And I actually set up over the weekend kind of in a Google Sheets or Excel, right, spreadsheet with a schedule for the Monday and Thursday rooms. And I immediately was like, this is just such a Twitter chat move for me, right, to say I need to know exactly who's going to be a guest and what our topic's going to be. And it looked just like that, right? So it's been wonderful to have the audio component within Clubhouse to hear voices, especially now where there's so many folks like yourselves that I get to see, over the course of the year during travels like to ISTE or to FETC or other larger, right, or smaller events. And so this has really bridged the gap there. There are, of course, limitations with just the invite only nature of it. That's gotten a little bit easier. I know I've had folks reach out on Twitter and I can just kind of send them different types of invites depending on where my app is that week. There's obviously limitations from iOS versus Android, right? Because it's iOS only. And there's accessibility options that are significant. There's no live captioning. I've tried over the course of this past weekend to have a Clubhouse room open and run the Google Slides captions that I love at the same time. And it picked it up really nicely, but that's not built into the app, right? So I love it for this idea of community building. I've run rooms that are more like panels where I might ask people some questions and then invite people into Q&A, and then more that's like an ed camp, more rapid fire. What do you think about this? What do you think? And it kind of goes in different directions. So I like Clubhouse for professional learning. And I think that it's a good example of how you can be flexible in live discussions with students. Maybe you don't need to have video on all the time for folks that are feeling very strongly about that, right? Maybe you can use audio updates asynchronously too. So I'm excited about it from that standpoint. And, TikTok has been a lot of fun the past year or so that I've been on it. Not every day, but a few times a week, I put up a new quick tip, usually 15 seconds or so on TikTok. But I've also found that it's a great place to learn new things, right? Or gather an EdTech tip. And there's a lot of educators that are very active. And yeah, sometimes there's dance videos. I don't think there are no dance videos on mine. Sometimes I try and pick popular music, right? Or things that are a little fun. But you might find a few educator dance videos, but they're mostly really actionable, right? Information you can use right away. And that vertical video, 15 to 60 second format is definitely replicable as a classroom project. You can have students make a 60-second video that retells a moment in history where two, people come together and talk about something very quickly, or even a series of lab safety tips, right, that are each 60 seconds each. So I like it from both a consumption and a creation, right? I think there's a lot of things that those two tools or apps, Clubhouse and TikTok, can be used for professional learning, but also inspiration for projects and activities you might do with students.
I think if you hit a nail on the head there, really, with the duration of it. We know from things like formative assessment that the children, retrieval and quizzing and all this sort of stuff works really well when it's low stakes rather than high stakes. And asking a learner to make a detailed video about X, Y, or Z, the Romans or whatever the topic is, can be quite high stakes. Ask a student to create a 15-second, 30-second video even. That reduces the stakes massively, doesn't it? And as we become used to the platform as well, it's not all polished. It's not, it's not like watching the Avengers. It's shaky hands. It's just really rough and ready. But I think what's really lovely is that it's the content that then really shines, and the things that people are sharing, the ideas and their words and things as well. So I think you absolutely massively hit the nail on the head there. Thank you so much, Monica. I'm going to see if I got the right question right here. I think this is the last question here now. Research shows that embedding oracy as a key part of the curriculum can really help with learner progress. Do you have any tip-top tips, Edu, on tools that can help promote oracy in the classroom? And I'm positive that you've got plenty of these. We've mentioned some already, haven't we?
Yeah, and just to make sure, because I know for a U.S. audience, sometimes oracy is not the term that we use. You're talking more generally about speaking and listening opportunities for students.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So I just wanted to clarify that. Yeah, so we talked a bit about it, right? With getting kids to record their voice in Seesaw to talk about their learning products, getting them to record their voice in a tool like Flipgrid to give a quick update, like you just shared. Right? It might be a quicker formative assessment piece. We know that speaking and listening opportunities can vary greatly. It doesn't have to be asking a student to recite a poem on stage in an auditorium in front of, hundreds of their classmates. They might make a quick 15-second video that goes through the haiku that they wrote, right? And upload it to a class portal. So for me, when I'm thinking about those types of skills, I'm just most excited about what we have in terms of options for kids and just increasing what it might look like for them. So all of those different types of work products, I think, are right. When we ask, what's the right way to do something, it really might come down to giving kids some choice, giving them an opportunity to see some examples and decide how they want to share. So I really love the flexibility, if we allow it, right? The flexibility that's there for kids to develop those different types of skills. But I also think, and this kind of gets back to what you mentioned about TikTok before, when we give kids that opportunity for creation to make something, right, it helps them become more discerning consumers and better evaluators, right? So if they are used to talking into, right, or speaking into that TikTok video recording, well, the next time they scroll through and see a video someone else made, right, they might think twice about, is this real or could that happen? And so, I love pairing some of this skill conversation within those, media literacy and digital citizenship components as well.
That's superb. Listen, thank you so much, Monica, for taking the time to come and share. I could do 10 more, but I try and keep the episodes down to about half an hour. So thank you so much for taking the time. Before we sort of wrap things up for the session, was there anything else that you'd like to share about the work you do or where people can find you? I know we've got your sort of short link going across the bottom there, so you can find out more about Monica by going to bit.ly/Monica bio. And I suspect that's case sensitive, like it often is with bit.ly links. So please do mind the case on there. Was there anything else you wanted to share at all, though, Monica?
Just a big thank you. I mean, this has been so wonderful to talk and chat with you and catch up with you. And anyone who's listening, if you have questions about these resources, at ClassTechTips is where you can find me on all the social platforms, or even something like Clubhouse and TikTok, which would maybe not have been on the list if we talked this time last year. But if you have a question, you can always reach out there. And then ClassTechTips is where you can find all of the things, right? The resources. You can even listen to my blog, listen to my podcast straight from the blog.
Brilliant stuff. Well, listen, thank you so much for taking the time to have a chat with me today, Monica. I really appreciate it. It's lovely to see you again too. Thank you so much. And that's it for another episode. Please do, as I say, remember to hit the subscribe button, whether you're listening on YouTube or listening via your favorite podcasting tool of choice. And we look forward to hearing from you in our next episode of Tip Top Tips Edu. Thanks very much.